So it's a real pleasure to welcome Jeremy Dean as our speaker for today's Texas Digital Humanities Consortium webinar on hypothesis. We were lucky to have Jeremy here at Rice a couple of months ago talking about hypothesis, and I was really impressed both with him as a speaker and with the educational potential of hypothesis. So just to give you a little bit of background about Jeremy, he is the Director of Education at Hypothesis. Before that, he was at Genius, where he was the Director of Education there, facilitating educational applications of their interactive archive of literary and historical text. And he brings deep knowledge of teaching and learning to his work. He has 15 years of experience teaching at the college and high school levels. He has a PhD in English from the University of Texas at Austin, so fellow Texan, where he worked as a project leader in digital writing, in the digital writing and research lab for 4 years, developing units and lesson plans around a range of digital tools. And he also was a program coordinator at the University of Texas Humanities Institute. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy Dean. I don't know about clapping when you guys are muted, but you know, we're clapping in spirit.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Lisa, can you? Okay, great.
Yeah, we sure can.
Well, thanks, Lisa, for inviting me here. It's exciting to meet this community and to be able to chat with you guys today. As Lisa mentioned, I moved to Texas in 1999 to teach high school in Houston and sent a lot of kids to U of H and local Texas colleges around the state, and then got a PhD at UT Austin. So, and I'm still based in Austin, Texas. So it's neat to connect with folks in the DH space in the Lone Star State, as they say. I will start off with just a little bit of a kind of Texas story here, just because I was teaching high schools. I was finishing up my dissertation at UT when my students kept telling me I had to check out this website, Rap Genius, because I was always bringing hip hop into the class as kind of poetry, and used a lot of digital tools in my classroom. And they said, you're going to love this site because it's, you know, hip hop meets digital technology. And indeed, I fell in love with it. As I was supposed to be finishing up my dissertation, I was working at what's the coffee shop in Austin? The Flight Path Coffee Shop, if you guys know that one. Trying to work on my final chapter of my dissertation when I just got sucked into this website, Rap Genius, that allows you to annotate, collaboratively annotate with a community of, kindred spirits, hip hop lyrics. And I became pretty obsessed with the site to the detriment of my final chapter of my dissertation. And at some point, it just clicked to me that this would be a great tool for the classroom, not for the close reading of hip hop as a kind of poetry in American literature, but really for any text, for a group of students to collaboratively comment on a text, asynchronously, digitally on a computer, and make line by line notes and have line by line conversations of text. And so I literally emailed the site and said, hey, is it cool? I know it's a rap site, but would you mind if I added poems and short stories and essays and novels that I'm teaching? And they were supportive of that. And one of the things that we added, one of the texts that we added was The Great Gatsby, which remains, I believe, one of the most popular literary texts on what's now Genius. You can see some data here. There's almost 200 people have contributed to chapter 1 here. And, it's got over 800,000 views. So there's even 3 people looking at it right now. This is pretty humble in comparison to how many people are looking at the new, Kanye West songs. There's millions and millions of people looking at those songs because it's a lyric site and they do very well on Google. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people there, even, again, outside of classrooms, collaboratively commenting on, annotating, having conversations about the lyrics of the latest hip-hop song. So it's a pretty cool site. They eventually hired me. I left Texas briefly to go to New York to work for Rap Genius and was their director of education and started an education program there. But eventually left Genius to join Hypothesis, which is a nonprofit open source version of the very same technology. Genius at some point expanded beyond the wrap corpus as a focus for annotation, with the kind of vision for annotating the web, which is where Hypothesis started. And unlike Genius when I first discovered it, Hypothesis allows you to take personal notes, have collaborative, notation, or select group annotation of anything that's on the web, any web URL, any text that's on the web, any PDF that's hosted on the web. You can take personal notes or have conversations around it. The hardest part is getting started, I think, and I'm going to briefly just pause on that. I do hope people will sign up today. It's a free service, and start playing around, since we're all obviously online. But you can sign up, you can create an account from the front page, and I'm already logged in, so you won't see what it looks like. I'll quickly log out. Yeah, you can create an account, and just all we need is an email address and a password and a username, and you'll have to confirm through email. It may go to your spam folder. So just to note, if you don't get an email immediately, that might be in a spam folder. But there are a few ways to use Hypothesis. If it's something that you think you might be using quite a bit, if you're going to use it in a classroom, I recommend downloading the Chrome extension, which is the sort of premier way to use it. If you're using a different browser like Firefox, there's a bookmarklet that you can use, and all this is available, on the front page of the website. Or you can embed it on your website if you have access to the code of your website, and you can just add some JavaScript. There's also a WordPress plugin to make your WordPress blog annotatable, Drupal plugin to make your Drupal installation annotatable, and we're shipping with Scalar now. If you happen to be working in that book publishing platform, there's a way within Scalar to just kind of turn on Hypothesis across a book, and we're working on more integrations like that. But really, the number one way to use it is the Chrome extension. The other way to use it is what we call a proxy, where there's a little space on our website. You can plug a URL in here and press annotate, and I'll show you how that looks in just a second. But just as an example of how I see this technology useful broadly, and how, again, I'm exceptional in this case because I've drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago with Genius. But somebody I follow on Twitter I've been following on Twitter for a while. Some of you guys might be familiar with Brian Croxall's work. About a week ago, he tweeted out this link to an LA Review of Books interview with Franco Moretti, who many of you may be familiar with in the DH space. And as soon as I saw this, I wanted to respond. I didn't end up doing it. I wanted to respond, okay, yeah, this is where we can read it, but we could also send out an annotatable link. And instead of just sort of having everybody go separately to LA Review of Books and read the article, maybe come back to Twitter and talk about it, we could all literally go to the LA Review of Books and talk about it there using Hypothesis. And so I did open up that article at Brian's suggestion, and you can see in my upper right-hand corner, you might have to move your friendly faces of your community down a bit, but you can see in the browser here, as soon as I come here, the Chrome extension for Hypothesis tells me that there's 19 annotations actually. So I can click on that, and it will open up the annotations, and it will open them up sort of right next to the friendly faces of your community. You might even move those to the left if you can. That might be a better place, given that the Hypothesis sidebar is always coming from the right. And I can see that somebody had already annotated it. Actually, when I visited it, I turned on the Hypothesis extension last week and noticed that this guy, Selfless Monster, who I happen to know, who's a teacher that's using Hypothesis in his classroom, Nathaniel Rivers, he's at the St. Louis University. I saw that he had already come. This is last Tuesday, the 2nd. He had already come and started annotating. And so then I did actually tweet out the annotatable link, and some more folks joined the conversation. But my point is that it's pretty cool to be able to, we use Twitter a lot as scholars to have conversation around issues and ideas and texts that we're studying or thinking about. And I think Hypothesis is kind of like a next step towards actually being able to have those conversations on the text themselves. The biggest problem with Twitter and with Facebook and with other forms of social media as a space for intellectual discourse is that they're always happening at a remove from the objects of study. And Hypothesis and other sort of other web annotation technology return the conversation to the page, and not to the page bottom in the kind of discussion, the comment section, but in line. I mean, we're humanities teachers, right? We all know that the best form of engagement with the text is through line by line commentary. We're always talking to our students about focusing on evidence, and talking about the words of the author to support their claims. And so, really quickly, I'll just demonstrate to you what it looks like to use the proxy. So I can, if you don't have the Chrome extension, you can grab any URL. So I copy and paste the URL here and return to the hypothesis front page. And I can paste in that LA Review of Books URL just on the front page in that little window, and it will open up. Again, I don't need the Chrome extension. I don't need anything. Maybe I'm doing this at a school computer where the Chrome extension is not installed. I'm not at home. Maybe I want to share there with somebody who doesn't necessarily have an account or has the Chrome extension. You can see the URL is changed up here. It has this prefix, via.hypothesis. And you can manually add that, or again, you can go to via.hypothesis, or to the front page of Hypothesis and drop a URL in there. And it will open it up with the Hypothesis sidebar activated. If you have an account, you can annotate. If there's annotations there, you'll be able to see them. It's very valuable for sharing an annotated page with folks that may not have an account, may not know what Hypothesis is, because it will open up the LA Review of Books looking like the LA Review of Books, and indeed it is. It just has this little sidebar here. All right, so that's Brian. And now I'm just going to kind of run through, and again, here's just another example. This is actually a PDF, right, at the New Medium Consortium. So I can open up their PDF for the recent higher education report, copy the URL, and go to the Hypothesis front page. Again, this is a .pdf, not just a regular website, not an HTML-based website. And this is also annotatable. I can see that it's got some annotations on it, and I'll quickly demonstrate how to create an annotation. I can do a private note, which is this little highlight button, or an annotation. I'm not signed in, so I'll have to sign in. But I can sign in through the sidebar. I don't need to go to Hypothesis I don't need to go to the Hypothesis website. I can create an annotation here. My dream is to have the New Media Consortium say that web annotation or collaborative annotation or social reading is part of the next 5 years of higher ed or K through 12 education one day. So now I can post this to public. I can also post it just to me. So I can take highlighted text, but I can also just add personal notes. In this case, why not make it public? And if you guys went to this PDF online, you'd be able to see my annotations. I've obviously already jumped in here a little bit. At this point, I'm going to run through just some of the use cases that we've seen of, this is specifically within the education space. If you're scholars or librarians, and you're thinking about research and archives, there's a lot of folks using Hypothesis in those spaces. I'm mostly an educator. I'm the director of education, so I'll focus on education stuff in my presentation, but we can maybe chat about the possibilities for scholar communication and within the archives as well for this kind of technology. But I'm going to run through a handful I think the best way to see how this works is to see it at work. And this is here, this is at Gutenberg.org. So this is a lit class. They're actually at St. Ed's in Texas. I tried to pull some Texas humanities examples for you. This is a class at St. Ed's, and they're annotating at Project Gutenberg. They're annotating as part of a private group, which is a feature we launched at the end of last fall. So you can annotate, privately for yourself, publicly, or you can create a group and have the annotations just appear to that group. So I'm a member of a lot of groups because I'm, working with a lot of classes, but there's no public, or there is a couple public annotations on this Life of Aquiano text at Gutenberg, but there's this one particular class at St. Ed's that's having an extensive conversation about the text here. And I'm not sure why it's not showing now, but you can scroll through the text and see their annotations. Sorry, I just lost this group that I was. There Um, they were just there. Anyway, this is at Project Gutenberg. This is at bartleby.com. This is a class at the University of Pittsburgh. They're obviously not in Texas, and they're doing all their work in public, but I can scroll through the text, see highlights, click on a highlight, open up an individual annotation, or scroll through the entire sidebar and see all the annotations and go see where a referent is connected. And these guys are actually doing pretty robust annotations. You can see there's works cited and things like that. So these are scholarly works in of themselves. And I happen to know that this professor uses this as a pre-research paper activity. So these kids are turning their annotations into research papers eventually. So those are two sort of out in the wild examples of hypothesis of work. Here's another one, another sort of Texas Humanities example. This is at the American Yelp, open education textbook, I think originally out of Rice or had some connections to Rice, but this is a class actually in California annotating that text. You can see there's conversations happening. So these are all examples of out in the wild, but then you can also, sorry, my Zoom is getting in the way here. You can also host you can also, add this annotation capability for your own websites in different ways. So this is actually Robin DeRosa at Plymouth State University, who is using Hypothesis with an open anthology of early American literature that she has put together. And this is in Pressbooks, which doesn't yet ship with Hypothesis native to it, but I'm told by the folks there that they're working on making it a lot easier for folks that are publishing in Pressbooks to simply add Hypothesis. But since they're both within WordPress, we have a WordPress plugin as well. It's actually quite easy to make an annotatable Pressbook. And I have a blog about how to do that if you're interested, actually, that I can link folks to. But here we are at Walt Whitman. You can see these kids are having conversations about this great American poetry, and they're threaded conversations. This is a really neat project demonstrating the WordPress plugin. You can see that my extension is off. It's grayed out right now, but nonetheless, Hypothesis is showing up. And it's also not through the VIA proxy. This is because this professor has embedded Hypothesis natively within his WordPress install using our WordPress plugin. And this is this was a class last semester at SF State. And they did all this literature, they annotated all this literature. It was really pretty remarkable. Another kind of personal, or class anthology that they had. And they did a remarkable work. You can see just here that there's, over 200 annotations on the yellow wallpaper. A few more use cases, then we can get to conversation. This is, again, a WordPress install. This is an NYU class, and this is their readings. And the readings are all PDFs for the most part. And Hypothesis can be used to annotate PDFs. So students would go to this reading section and then open up the PDF and then activate Hypothesis and be able to annotate. And I need to toggle to public because I'm still stuck on that group, but you can see here the students have annotated this PDF. And the really cool thing about this technology, which is basically means that anything that's in the library, anything that you can Xerox and then optically recognize and then host online can be annotated. So really the possibilities for what can be annotated are endless. It's a matter of how easy or hard it is. Obviously, annotating a New York Times article that's already going to have a web address is quite easy, but really anything can be annotatable. And lately, I've been really thinking a lot about PDFs of academic articles and even PDFs of works of literature that can then be annotated if they're hosted somewhere online. This is a poli-sci professor that hosted a bunch of legal cases and had students annotating those. Again, inline conversation. We do work with some scholarly publishers. University of Michigan in particular is embedding Hypothesis across a wide range of their publications, a lot of individual books, but also in some of their journals. And here, former colleague of mine, actually a UT PhD, a grad in rhetoric, Jim Brown, when his book Ethical Programs came out with University of Michigan Press, they shipped it with the digital version with Hypothesis. And then Casey Boyle, who's a professor of rhetoric at UT, had his grad students annotated using Hypothesis. And so you can see here their conversations with grad students in the margins of this Michigan text. And again, this is with with Hypothesis being native. You don't need the Chrome extension or anything to see these annotations. I wanted to quickly just showcase student writing. I mentioned Nathaniel Rivers. This is one of his students, but this is a student blog. So it's not work of literature, work of a history textbook or something like that. This is a student blog, and Nathaniel and his students are commenting on the student writing. It's pretty neat because these kids got quite a bit of feedback from the professor. I think Nathaniel last semester had thousands of annotations on his students' blogs, but also from their classmates, little kind of peer review stuff. Just finally want to just show what hypothesis activity can look like off of the page, that out of context. I mean, obviously the brilliance of this technology is to be able to have the kind of conversation and commentary going on in context on a text that's being studied. I mean, that's really what's neat about it. But there are some ways to parse and look at activity outside of context. So this is just the hypothesis fire hose. This is a stream. Anybody can check this out, and you can sort of see like what are people up to on hypothesis right now. If some of you guys were practicing annotations, you might be able to see your annotations pop up here. This is for all public annotations. You can see the one I just created live a second ago. You can also filter this by an individual. So I can see my own annotations in one place. It's actionable. I can edit them. I can delete them. And I can also view somebody else's annotations. So I just saw Morris from Austin College pop in. I could go and look at Morris's stream, and I wouldn't be able to edit his annotations. I wouldn't have the privilege to do that, but I could reply to his annotations. So you can imagine either with a scholarly colleague or with a student who you were engaging with, you could go and see their stuff and respond outside of the context of a text, which is useful if there's a broad range of texts that might be studied, or if I'm just interested in what Morris has been up to using hypothesis across the web, I can go and sort of discover text and start to engage him, just as I might through checking out a Twitter feed through his hypothesis profile. And this is actually actively something that we're working on, updating and improving what these profiles and activity pages look like. Right now, it's just a very basic stream. What was this? Let's get that one. People use tags. And so this is the stream filtered by tags, by a tag called Poetry Garza. And this is actually a high school teacher in Dallas at Green Hill School. And you can see his students have been, about a month ago, we're doing a poetry unit. And so they were tagging all their annotations Poetry Garza. And this is all their content that they created over time. And they were on so many poems, obviously, short text all across Poetry Foundation and other websites, that this stream of their content was incredibly useful to sort of see what folks have been up to. And again, it's actionable. I can reply here to my students, or I can reply here to my classmates. I mentioned that we have started groups, and this is actually Morris's group for he can correct me, but I think it was a January term class. So it was a How the Web Works group, and this is the stream searched by the group. You guys actually wouldn't be able to see this because you weren't members of his group, but because I was a member of his group, I'm able to see the annotations therein. So these are his students from January. This is what his group homepage looks like. This is a link back to that stream, but you can see it has all the texts that they read together. And so I could click on one of these and look at the annotations in context, or I could click here and look at the stream of annotations across the text and across time. Here's one of the texts I think you guys annotated, right, Morris?
Yeah, that's right.
And I think another class also annotated here, interestingly enough, if I remember correctly. So there's almost 100 annotations on this article by Audrey Waters. And I think there was a class at University of Mary Washington that also came in here. It was annotating at the same time. Or maybe actually these are their annotations because they're public annotations. But in any case, you can see that's pretty densely annotated stuff on Medium. Of course, Medium has its own annotation tools as well. So when you're working on Medium, you kind of have to choose hypothesis or Medium. And I often think of and speak about hypothesis as Medium for every page on the internet, because this little note feature or highlight feature is available on sites outside of just medium.com, which is a huge advantage for scholarship and for education as well. And this is just an example of a student stream from that page, their work, across the Texas at the University of Mary Washington class. And I'll just finish by saying that I've developed a lot of resources at Hypothesis/education for teachers to use. Quick start guides on how to get started with the Chrome extension, how to get started with other ways to access Hypothesis layer, and assignments that I've culled from some of our practicing teachers, and some student-facing resources as well. And so I think that is about my 20, 30 minutes. I have to sneeze, so I'm going to shut up and sneeze, and then maybe we can have a little chat. I welcome being pushed and pulled in any direction about how this technology can be useful for academics and educators.
Thanks a bunch, Jeremy. That was really great. So do we have questions, comments from folks? You can either unmute yourself and speak, or put them in the group chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you talked about the kind of two different ways to use Hypothesis, either in the wild with the Chrome extension, or another way, and then or to embed it. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of those two ways, or the use cases around why you would pick one or the other, other than just, I guess, not having to install the extension.
Yeah, well, I think that's huge. To be honest, I am helping teachers get their students signed up, and it's hard enough to get 20 students to sign up for a service, not to mention to sign up and then download an extension to a browser. People don't know what Chrome is. People don't know what an extension is. It does save quite a bit to not have to do that. And so actually a lot of teachers will just go with the VIA proxy, which again can be used in the wild. But I honestly, once I set up my own blog this January using Reclaim hosting, and added Hypothesis, within the WordPress, and the ability to just have the stuff native on the page, especially if you're doing something public facing and saying like, hey, anybody that comes here is going to see some yellow highlights, can click on them, can very easily sign up in the sidebar and join the conversation. The barrier to entry, whether it's a class or just in general, I think is a lot less when it's native in that way. And the WordPress plugin especially is an excellent tool, because the cool thing about the WordPress plugin is that it can be turned on and off for any page or post within an install. Drupal right now is across the install, so you don't have that granularity of what pages can get used. Drupal kind of sucks anyway, doesn't it? I'm a big fan of WordPress. So, and then if you're savvy enough to be doing your own website, you can just add JavaScript, which is the same thing. I mean, the WordPress plugin is just adding the JavaScript to pages within your WordPress install. But if you're got enough the developer chops to just add the JavaScript, you can do that. That's what Michigan is doing. If I can find in my 100 tabs or so here what's going on. This is not a WordPress install. This is not a Drupal install. This is just a website that Michigan put up, and they added the JavaScript, and so it's natively here. And it's the advantage for them too, especially within Scala Commons. Like, yeah, you don't even have to know what Hypothesis is. You could come here and sort of click here and be like, what is going on here? There's annotations, and then there's some stuff up here, and I can figure out how to sign up and join. So if you have the ability to add it natively, I don't see why not. Of course, the one reason you don't want to do that is that you're not going to copy and paste the New York Times to your WordPress install. And so it does become useful to have the in the wild tools. I kind of coined that term today. If you're roaming the internet, But for classes especially, and we have the tools. I think I showed you a little bit for Morris's class. Right now Morris's class can kind of use this as a hub because all the stuff is here. But if you're not using groups and you're just sending kids all over the web to different URLs, it can be hard to keep track of all that. I mean, it's amazing and it's awesome. And we have any text that's annotated by the group will show up here. And so that makes it easier to navigate the web in that way. But if you can get the stuff on your website, especially with PDFs, again, and you're in the libraries, Jennifer, so you might be able to tell me if I'm wrong about this, and you can make a WordPress install private. I'll say that up front. But if you have 20 academic articles that your students are reading over the course of a term, you could send them to JSTOR and Project Muse, who are partners of ours, and they can annotate much easier at Project Muse because of the way they have things set up. But you could certainly download PDFs from JSTOR and annotate them. But if you're able to, I'm not going to speak to the copyright of this all, but if you can drag all those PDFs to a WordPress install and just have them basically hosted there, certainly seems a lot easier than sending kids through all those databases and multiple signups and stuff like that. So there's advantages to both, but I have been recently very in love with the WordPress plugin just because it's there. And I want to see this as something that's native to the internet of the future anyway, not something that you need an extension for. I mean, that you'd be able to have this kind of technology within your browser as part of what features that Chrome has or Firefox has. So that native look, that native feel is what we're going for long term anyway. But thanks for that question, Jennifer. Hope that answered it.
So we have a question from Lenny at UT Arlington. Can the amount of contributions be controlled? What if the site becomes obsolete?
All right, so two-part question. Let's see. Can the amount of annotations be controlled? Currently not, but if there was a text, and this was my quintessential question with the Gatsby text, right? When I added Gatsby to Genius, nobody was using Rap Genius for literature besides my class. Certainly nobody was searching this rap lyric website for F. Scott Fitzgerald. So we had a completely clean slate. We had essentially a private space, and we were the first annotators to get there, and most of the real estate was available to us, right? There was no history of annotation of the green light. My students got to be the first ones to talk about it. But now, if you were teaching a 10th grade English class, especially at the high school level, and you came to that Gatsby, which you saw has hundreds and hundreds of annotations just on chapter 1, your high school sophomores might be less able to contribute to that conversation because it's already so full of content and voices. It'd be a useful exercise for them to try to enter that conversation, but nonetheless, it can get noisy, right? Which I suspect is part of that question. So it can't be limited. If there's a Donald Trump speech and a bunch of people have annotated it, sorry, I had to get a little political, and you want to have your own reading, right now you'd have to create a private group in order to have that kind of quieter version of the text. There's no way to limit it. For teachers using this semester by semester, now I could use, Gatsby actually is not supposed to be online available for free. I think it's under copyright. I did, for the record, add it to Genius in small pieces originally. Now it's there in full and illegally. But say it's a Project Gutenberg text. I showed you the life of Equiano. If that professor at St. Ed's was going to come back next semester, she would have two choices. She could say, I want to continue the conversation, continue the project of glossing this Life of Acquiano with my students at St. Ed's, and maybe after 5 years have a really well-edited text at Gutenberg. Or she could sort of say, let's do another private group for fall 2016 and have a clean slate. So what I'm getting at is that the group feature allows for the kind of fresh start on a text if a text has gotten too noisy. But also obviously useful if you're just interested in privacy for other reasons as well. And so that was my attempt at answering the limiting the number of annotations. And what was the other part, Lisa?
What if the site becomes obsolete?
Okay, so by obsolete, I suspect that means like the the URL goes down or something like that, or it's moved. So a couple things to say about that. One, any annotation that's made on using hypothesis will always live here. So if this is the Poetry Foundation. The Poetry Foundation went under for some reason, and the poetryfoundation.org disappeared. This annotation would remain at hypothesis. Right now, there's not a lot of content. Looks like this person has annotated an exclamation mark. Let's take this one as an example. Say this Poetry Foundation site goes down. We would still know that K. Aneg, or whatever this person is, had made this annotation. So we'd have this much of an artifact of the now obsolete website, if that makes sense. But the other really cool thing that I've noticed, and we're working with Internet Archive for more robust kind of archiving of annotations in relationship to websites. But this happened with a project that I was working on because the KQED, which is the PBS station in the Bay Area, was some of their teachers in their education community were using Hypothesis, and they've been using Hypothesis on this blog, a WordPress blog at KQED. And then for some reason, KQED decided to kind of change the domain name. And so all those previous web addresses, you couldn't get to them. You were getting redirected to a new website at KQED. And that new URL was not the one that Hypothesis recognized as having been annotated. So the annotations these students had done on the same content, Hypothesis didn't know to go there because it was a totally different URL. So two things about that. One, if you went to the Internet Archive and you looked at the original URL, which now bounces to a new URL, and turned on Hypothesis at the Internet Archive, those annotations would appear. So if a website has been archived at the Internet Archive and you turn on Hypothesis at that snapshot of the website, annotations associated with that URL will show up. Now, you can also tell in the code of your page, KQED could have done this and said, like, this old website this old URL is the same as this new URL, and Hypothesis would have just re-anchored the annotations. So if you are the one in control of making obsolete your previous website, you can do so in such a way to carry over the annotations. But there are some ways that they're being archived at Internet Archive just by the virtue of their structure. And also, within the streams of content on our website. So there is going to be some history of an annotation on a website that no longer exists within our stream. I hope that answers the obsolete question. I'm not sure.
Thanks. Yeah, so on the chat, we've got a tip about embedding Hypothesis and also a question. Well, let's follow up first on the what happens to annotations if Hypothesis goes away?
Well, that's a scary question. I've staked my future on Hypothesis not going away. I got two small kids. So right now, this is something that it's a hugely important question because Hypothesis, and if you're unfamiliar with Hypothesis to this point, you probably think this is a client. This is another kind of vendor. This is another product or tool that we can use in the classroom or elsewhere. And to some extent, that's true. There is a Hypothesis annotation client, but Hypothesis is a nonprofit also advocating for this type of technology to exist on the future of the web, whether it's called Hypothesis, or not. That there will be some web annotation functionality in the future of the web, and there will be multiple clients that you could use. Maybe Genius is one of them, and they'll be all based on interoperable standards that allow you to choose your client, just as you might choose your web browser, but still access the same content, not web pages, but annotations. So we are absolutely committed to that kind of interoperability and portability, meaning that this stuff should be yours and is yours, and Hypothesis makes no claims of certainly copyright or anything else, intellectual property about it, and they should be yours to carry with you and do with what you want. Currently, you'd need to understand how to use API to extract your annotations from Hypothesis. You could, it's still possible. Obviously, I personally can't. I'm trained as an English professor, so I don't know how to do that. But we have within the immediate roadmap, and that means something that I prioritize for the next 6 to 8 months, to have better export features, to be able to export annotations in various formats both to just, in case hypothesis disappears, you can export them and have them, and you don't lose that stuff. But more realistically, I hope, and more practically, if you want to write a paper, you're a student, you've done a bunch of annotations on Gatsby, now you have to write a paper on Gatsby, export that set of annotations into a Word document and start chopping it up as part of your final paper. Or for an academic, you've done a bunch of research, you got invited, you're flattered that you got invited by Lisa to speak at Rice, and you did a bunch of research using Hypothesis, making annotations across the web. You can sort of export all that and turn it into your talk at Rice in some other format. But that's a hugely important question because, I honestly feel right now that we haven't lived up to our mission because the everyday person can't very easily extract their annotations. It's in the roadmap. We're a small team. It's not as if we're deferring it for bad reasons. But you can get it out by API now, and some people doing some really interesting work with that in terms of data visualization. But eventually, I want it to be just one click, turn it into a Word file or something like that.
Great. So can you talk a little bit about how Hypothesis and ORCID IDs work together? Does this have the potential of making annotations easily attributable to researchers or scholars?
Yeah, so do people in the humanities use ORCID?
Not as much as in other disciplines.
So we have a formal partnership with ORCID to map Hypothesis, as I forget who the funding agency is. It's one of the foundations. It might be Sloan, it might be the Moore Foundation or something like that, or Arnold, that has given us money to specifically map ORCID IDs to user profiles within Hypothesis. So eventually, as my understanding would be that if you're now you guys still see the stream here of some class. Eventually, if Joelle Garza, who's a high school teacher in Dallas, I could click on his username and get to, again, this is going to be a revamped profile page that would allow for an avatar and a bio and maybe his top tags and top text that he's annotated and some other stuff. This is part of something that we're actively working on right now. And eventually, an ORCID ID will be part of that. And it's going to be part of it quite soon because it's an active grant that has been built into this. So yes, eventually you could see annotations, see the user who created the annotations, click through and find their ORCID ID. I don't really understand much about what ORCID ID is, but you certainly would have some reputational system through ORCID mapped to annotations or mapped to annotators. That makes sense. And that is something that's going to happen quite soon, as I said, because it's an active grant. So when we redo the profile pages, you'll see ORCID ID there. So go and get your ORCID IDs. I guess I got to go get one too.
All right, do we have any other questions? So I've got one. I wonder if you could speak briefly about the educational impact of using Hypothesis. Like what difference does it make to learning?
Great, Lisa. Thanks for that question. Well, this is something that I was teaching high school English when I started using this kind of technology, and it really exploded my class. It really blew up what was going on there. So I can speak about that person, but I can also speak because I'm obviously, managing an education community. But there's so many different ways that it can inspire a class. I mean, the basic thing for me is, and this is important in terms of digital humanities, I'm sure some of you guys are much more sophisticated in terms of the tools you're using and how you're thinking about digital humanities and computational humanities. I'm a pretty traditional guy. It started off with me like I wanted my kids to write in their books, and all of a sudden there was the ability to not only write in the books, but write to each other inside of their books through this kind of social reading technology, which I just thought was really cool. If kids are reading a text before class and annotating it publicly and responding to each other, when you start class the next day, that conversation is going to be jump-started, whether you're even part of it or not. I mean, first of all, you can go through and get a sense of the conversation from the night before on the text and jump into some specific foothold within the text and within what the class is thinking because you've seen some of their thoughts and conversations prior to a class discussion. And so I think it's going to, it invests class discussion. It really jumpstarts class discussion. But you'll also suddenly see the kid that doesn't normally participate in class discussion bringing something to the text. I mean, I distinctly remember reading The Bluest Eye with the class, and this young lady who was not very, doing very well in my class had found all these old advertisements for racial beauty products, or using race as a kind of trope within advertising for beauty products, whitening, things like that. And she found all these wonderful, terrible, but amazing artifacts of these racial beauty products, and brought them into the Bluest Eye text, which of course is the context of that text. And she wasn't good at the traditional ways that, or she wasn't yet successful at the traditional ways that I was assessing students and hearing student voices. And suddenly she brought in this stuff, and I was able the next day say, where did you find this stuff? This is amazing. This is all this historical research that I should have brought in to the conversation. And this was a student that didn't normally perform. So she was able to join the conversation in that way. So I think it jumpstarts class conversation. I think it helps certain students who might not be traditional learners, or at least being assessed through traditional learning means. Are they talking in classes? Are they writing amazing essays? It allows their voices to get heard. And then there's a third way, which is that there's many ways, but another way I'll just add before I shut up is that you start to see students taking ownership of their knowledge and their language. And their web presence in ways that, and there's other people on this call, by the way, Morris and others have taught with this, so they may be able to speak to this as well. But they come to understand themselves as scholars. They come to see themselves as scholarly contributors, or at least, civic intellectuals, and being part of a larger conversation about literature, about stuff online. And that's a transformation that's pretty powerful. I didn't do it. I meant to do it when I opened up that Gatsby link, but I can still click on the top contributors because Genius, of course, is gamified. I can still click on the top contributors and point to 3 high school students from St. Stephen's, 3 or 4 years ago, who are public contributors to this scholarly work of The Great Gatsby. They're still some of the top contributors, and now they're juniors in college or something like that. I think that's pretty neat. It's certainly the coolest thing I ever did with the class in terms of public humanities, public scholarship, public participation in this kind of stuff. And I think that just changes the game of the class. It's not just about writing for Mr. Dean and getting a grade and looking at the red ink. It's really about doing something bigger than the class.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Morris threw out another use case, using hypothesis to create biases and misrepresentation in web articles, e.g. climatefeedback.org. So one last quick question. Can annotations be public if the articles are password protected, e.g. inside an LMS?
Right. So there are some hairy situations that one can get into. Right now, if I was if I had access to an LMS site or platform that was password protected, if I had access and I annotated an HTML page within that LMS as a public annotation, I could potentially create a public annotation on a private document. And thus you would see my public annotation on the screen here. But you wouldn't, when you tried to click through to the text itself, you'd have to have the login. So yes, you can create a public annotation. And in fact, there'd be a public representation of that annotation in the hypothesis stream, but only folks that have access to the LMS, whatever the logged in site would be able to actually go and see the annotation in context. If I really want to make it foolproof private, I'd want to make that a private group within my LMS. I'm not sure if the question was trying to lead in one direction or not, but you could publicly annotate within Canvas or within Blackboard, within edX, and folks just wouldn't be able to get to the original context for the annotations unless they too had access to the documents.
Thanks. And thanks for a really excellent presentation, Jeremy.
Of course, thank you.
I have a couple of announcements to make, and I'll throw open the floor for other announcements in just a second. First of all, the Texas Digital Humanities Consortium mini conference is coming up on Friday, May 27th. It's going to be immediately following the Texas Digital Library Conference, and supported by the good folks at the Texas Digital Library Conference. We are currently reviewing proposals right now, so we hope to announce a program soon. What makes this conference kind of unique is it's like a combo or mashup between an unconference and a conference. So there is a kind of structured presentation to kick off the session that'll last about 15-20 minutes. And that will be followed up by more immersive conversation. So we hope to bring together the best of both the traditional conference and that can't be unconference format. We hope to see you all there. It's going to be in Austin. Also here at Rice, we have a couple of great speakers in this seminar that Jeremy was a part of. James Kuno, who's the president of the Getty Foundation, will be here tomorrow speaking at 4 p.m. And then Ethan Zuckerman from MIT Media Lab will be here at Rice next Thursday speaking at 4 p.m. So if you're in the area or up for a road trip, we'd welcome you. And I can give you info about that if you just get in touch with me.
Don't miss Ethan. Ethan's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to both of those. Other announcements? We got 2 minutes.
This is Charles Curtis. I just want to say thanks, Jeremy, and also for all the great questions. This was very helpful.
Thanks, Charles. I just want to say that, folks should feel free to reach out to me, Jeremy Dean at Hypothesis with a dot before the IS. I'm happy to chat further about this stuff. And if you're especially a teacher that's interested in using this in the classroom, I'm happy to help you figure out the best way to do that. But also if you're an archivist or thinking about this for research purposes, really excited to think through those use cases in community with folks. So please do reach out, Jeremy Dean at Hypothesis. Follow me on Twitter, Dr._JD. I'm trying to catch Lisa in followers. She's very popular.
Well, so you're getting lots of thanks in the chat, and I wanted to just echo that. Thank you for a really great presentation, and thanks to all of you for coming and asking really excellent questions. All righty. Well, I hope to see you at the mini conference in May, if not before.
Thanks, everybody.